An exclusive memo obtained by Rebel News from the Immigration Department shows that the federal government was relaxing vaccination rules on illegal border crossers while simultaneously imposing stricter ones on Canadian truckers. Today, I'll show you the proof.
Discuss about Roxham Road. Right now, so far this year, we received 36,000 people. So it means that 98% of the irregular newcomers are coming to Quebec. So it put a pressure not only on French, but also on public services.
What I have today is concrete evidence that the cross-border vaccine mandate imposed on Canadian truckers was all about compliance, and just compliance with the federal government, and frankly, nothing else. I have a memo obtained from Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship Canada dated late January 2022. The memo was made available to us at Rebel News through access to information filings. If you'd like to support our independent paper trail investigation efforts and offset our research costs, please consider making a donation at rebelinvestigates.com.
To the nearly 90% of truckers across the country who've gotten vaccinated, who continue working hard to keep us fed and keep our economy moving, thank you.
Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland's own notes submitted to the Public Order Emergency Commission, that's the official examination of the federal government's use of a counter-terrorism law on peaceful anti-COVID restriction protesters, show that the government knew the vaccine requirement for truckers could affect 30 to 50% of cross-border truckers who were unvaccinated, and not the 10% that they claimed. But even worse, just as the government was imposing that vaccine mandate on cross-border truckers, the federal government was relaxing the rules for illegal border crossers and in fact did not care about their vaccination status at all. Let's look at these documents. Page 1. It's a memo to the Immigration Minister, Sean Fraser. The memo says that illegal border crossers are okay to proceed into Canada without a negative COVID test. Not only did they not have to be vaccinated, they didn't even have to test, just as long as the illegal border crossers had their own quarantine plan in place. How on earth could illegal border crossers have their own quarantine plan in place when they cross the border and then they are nearly instantly put up in refugee hotels? The memo also says that that's the immigration minister, told immigration to keep doing this, letting unvaccinated and untested border crossers come into the country and to speed up testing for others who didn't have their own quarantine plan in place so that they didn't have to wait. Because why should an illegal border crosser have to wait for their COVID test to come back like normal Canadian travelers had to? You can also see here that the federal government decided there was no reason to have illegal border crossers, regardless of vaccination status or their own quarantine plan, have to go to a federal quarantine facility. They should just be able to go free wherever they want. Again, unlike returning Canadian travelers, or for that matter, Canadian truckers who were ultimately forced to quarantine for the crime of keeping the Canadian economy afloat. On page 2, we can see the memo mentions meetings between the ministers in January 2022. The timeline is very important because while the federal government was imposing the vaccine mandate on truckers, they were saying the vaccination status of illegal border crossers didn't really matter to them. And the feds were worried about an overfill of a hotel near Roxham Road. That's the place where the majority of illegal border crossings happen in this country because of a backlog of border crossers waiting for COVID tests, which is why they decided they didn't even care if the illegal border crossers were tested. On page 3, we've got the vaccination stats on the Roxham Road border crossers. Between November 29th and January 5th, 366 border crossers of the well over 3,000 were vaccinated. On page 4, a bureaucrat is raising concerns that illegal border crossers might not be familiar with public health measures here in Canada, given that they're coming from that safe other country, the United States, which has different rules. And on page 5, bureaucrats are again raising concerns, this time that packing all these people waiting for COVID tests into that hotel near Roxham Road could possibly be raising the chance of COVID transmission. Not that those concerns stopped anybody from doing anything except allowing people who are illegally entering into our country to continue to proceed to enter the country, while imposing completely different, stricter rules on Canadian citizens who are just ultimately, at the end of the day, trying to do their jobs, which, as I said at the beginning of this video, is an indication that nobody thought for a second that the vaccine passport on cross-border truckers had anything to do with COVID transmission. It was about bringing up to 50% of the cross-border truckers to kneel at the government's feet. But those truckers didn't kneel, did they? They rose up in the anti-restriction freedom convoy and not only inspired a nation to fight back, but inspired the world to fight back against unconstitutional, tyrannical, and authoritarian COVID restrictions. And the government, the way they always do, responded by being even more tyrannical, unconstitutional, and authoritarian by using a counterterrorism law called the Emergencies Act on peaceful, anti-restriction demonstrators in our nation's capital. Trudeau used the Emergencies Act against citizens who just wanted to be treated the same as the illegal border crossers at Roxham Road. For Rebel News, I'm Sheila Gunn-Reid. Today's exclusive documents were obtained through access to information filing. This sort of work can be expensive and time-consuming. If you'd like to offset our research and filing costs, please consider making a donation at rebelinvestigates.com.